You're listening to Drop It Like It's Pop.
Drop it like it's pop. I'm Georgie Statius.
And I'm Vicken Karkukli. This is where two lovers of pop culture come together, unfiltered and unedited, to analyze the biggest stories, moments, and yes, controversies the world of pop has to offer from our very special point of view as media professionals and international event experts.
I'm the PR specialist.
And I'm the journalist.
Join us as we agree to disagree and talk pop till we drop. Welcome to the third episode of season 2 of Drop It Like It's Pop. I'm Georgie Statius and I'm coming to you from Melbourne, Australia. And as always, I am very pleased to welcome Vicken Karkukli, who's coming to us from France and has been indulging in a little bit of hospitality this evening, I believe.
What do you mean by indulging in hospitality?
Well, see, of course, it's my we're recording this at 7:15 a.m. my time. What's the time check over there?
It is 11:15 p.m. So
Oh my gosh.
20:15.
And you've had a nice dinner out.
Oh yes, I did. I did.
He's already forgotten that he's
No, well, yes, so I did, and I had a few drinks with dinner,
Well,
which
this
is
could go
very
any which
unlike.
way.
Hmm?
This could go
Well,
any which way.
yes, and there's something very cultural about Thursday night drinks in France
Is
as
there?
well. So I do enjoy, yes. I mean, I don't know if it's cultural to France or if it's cultural to my uni years, but the weekend
Ah.
always started on Thursday evening.
Oh,
And
that's interesting. See, Friday night drinks were always big in Australia, but since
yeah.
COVID, workplaces seem to do sort of Thursday nights more because so many people work from home on a Friday.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I can absolutely see the appeal of that. For us, it was more wanting to go out as many nights in the week as possible. So
Yes.
that's what we did, and we'd still attend classes at 8 a.m. on the Friday morning. I mean, I would.
Well, we were smart. We were smart. We were young.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even watch the Oscars anymore when I'm in Europe because you
Gosh.
have to pull an all-nighter for that.
See, see.
And that's one of the things I'm going to miss about not living in America.
Well,
The
the
possibility to watch the award shows live at a
yes.
reasonable hour.
I was just going to say, excuse me, because well, you're a little bit loose. I've got a croaky throat, so this episode could go any which way. Um,
I know.
listeners, I was trying to sort of do some voice exercises before we came on, and we
Well,
realised
I tried to teach you a couple I'd seen in a Celine Dion documentary, but that
you
didn't do
did.
anything, did it?
Well, I couldn't do them to start with, so um, that's the only thing holding me back from a career in Las Vegas. Apparently, is I can't do the
Well,
voice.
we need to tell our producers that we're going to need a voice coach or something to warm
We
us up before we go live.
exactly, and I mean, I don't want to sort of get people too excited, but there may be an imminent episode where we are both on the same time zone.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Just going to leave that there.
Yes.
But let's get straight into this week's episode, seeing we've talked for long enough about not much. Where are we going this week?
Well, we're staying somewhere that is supposed to be very comfortable, that is
Mm,
supposed to be very cozy, that is supposed to be a core value that we share, that is supposed to be a safe haven, sorry, not a heaven, a
oh, he's
haven.
off. Watch out.
No, well, I mean, slip of the tongue, but that kind of says something about what we're talking about
Ah,
today. Yeah, because a safe haven and also one of the most immediate communities, the one that we're born into, and that's family. So I've, in one sentence, exhausted all the concepts that I wanted to bring up during the entire podcast.
and thank you for
Thank
listening.
you for tuning in, listeners. This has been episode 3.
It really, because we've sort of, I mean, we haven't directly talked about family and obviously in the context of pop culture, but of course, they do come up in every element that we're talking about. And more and
Absolutely.
more, and I mean, you know, the term nepo baby,
Yes.
which has become quite a thing of today. Whereas, there's been families in the show business and pop culture world for, well, hundreds of,
As long
as
as we
long
can remember.
as long as pop culture's been around. So I'm
Yeah.
interested in what was your interest in this topic?
Well, certainly there has been a thread ever
Mm,
since we started the podcast. And if you think about all the topics that we have spoken about and all the individuals that we have spoken about since we started last year, there has certainly been a thread. And what is so specific about our podcast is that we look at pop culture from the point of view of communication and media specialists. And I have to say, one of the things that we learn, one of the things that we're taught, and then one of the things that we perfect as we go along is to read between the lines and find some common threads in the thing that we observe. So, very, very often I have found myself looking at our episodes and thinking, oh, there's more than one. There's certainly
mm,
more than one thread throughout the how many episodes we've had since we started. But this one for me was important to bring up at one point. We talked about it last year that we were going to do it. And I'm happy that this is happening today because family is a concept that is so incredibly heavy when it comes to the meaning that it carries, either positive or negative, because as I said, it's one of our core values. It's one of our safe havens, name it what you will. And understandably, from the first episode of our season, this season, where we paid tribute to your dad, um, and we spoke about how important family has been for us in shaping
mm.
our identity and our approach of pop culture. So I felt now is the right time to actually go back in and dissect, take some distance, but also take a look at some of the biggest family moments
Mm,
and families in pop culture. So, and we've been talking a lot about pop culture as fiction, as fictional narratives, but also as people in the pop culture world and the narrative that they now represent themselves as existing individuals and not as fictional characters. So there's a whole
exactly.
lot to uncover there.
There is, and there's kind of two contexts, isn't there? Because there's families as kind of brands, um, and then the dynamics of those families. But then there's the way the media portray those families and make judgment on those families, and the media and the consumers of the pop culture. Um,
Yes.
because I think of the commentary that's constantly around Brooklyn Beckham and his relationship now with his family, or maybe fractured relationship. Who knows? Because it's all just speculation in the media. Um, and so I want to sort of touch on that a bit later. But first of all, I'm keen to know when you think of families in pop culture, which are the ones that sort of stand out for you?
I mean, if we're talking about pop culture today, and as I was getting ready for this episode, and I send you some elements which were kind of my mood board for this episode, one magazine cover that struck me a few years back because it created a bit of backlash as well, was the Kardashians when they
Mm,
all posed together. And that was on the cover of Cosmopolitan, the US edition of Cosmopolitan. And the magazine called them America's first family.
mm.
So on the cover, you had obviously Kris Jenner, Khloe, Kim, and Kourtney Kardashian, and Kendall and Kylie Jenner as well.
No,
So
Rob.
all six of them. Hmm?
Rob wasn't there.
Rob wasn't there. Cosmopolitan is a women's magazine, and that was in November of 2015. So we're talking about almost 10 years ago now. And I remember because the concept of first family in the United States carries a lot of meaning as well. And
Mm,
At the time, Barack Obama was still president, and it was, I mean, the Obama family was considered a very wholesome kind of
Yes.
all-American family, and I think that for Cosmopolitan to go as far as um, calling the Kardashians America's first family, there was something very daring about it. Um, I remember that moment, but there's been many other moments. What I want to say about the concept of family is that there's still something very conservative about approaching the concept of family. And as years have passed, it's not so much who constitutes a family. It's still that the concept of family still exists as one of the cornerstones of our lives and
Mm,
society. Also, of course, the media interest. So I'm not saying that when I'm talking about a family, I'm not talking about a husband and a wife and two children.
yes.
I'm talking about this group that is referred to as the family, regardless of who constitutes the group. And
Yes.
there's still something that is highly conservative about people's relationship with family, because even among people who have chosen families that differ from that, conservative concept of the family that is still some people's preferred family, um, there's always the notion that if you don't have it, you have to create your own.
Mm,
So I found that incredibly fascinating because there's always going to be the concept of the chosen family if the actual real family kind of doesn't exist. And I think it ties in, and it's been very interesting having these conversations with you, Georgie, because um, I realize also how culturally different we can be, although we live in the Western world and have grown up in the Western world and share a lot of values that are the same. But at the same time, the cultural differences that we were able to kind of um, talk about over the last few episodes that seem very insignificant at first. But last episode, when we were talking about jumping the shark, and we went as far as saying, well, I mean, from one culture to the next, it might be a different thing. I think there's also something to be said about family in that aspect.
mm,
So culturally, there's still also a great significance to that. And at the same time, having lived in the United States from 2022 to just a few weeks ago, um, the concept of community is one that you can't kind of dissociate from the concept of family. And so I also wanted to talk about community because particularly, and that's a very heavy cultural component of life in the United States, people will throw the word community at you morning, noon, and night. And having lived in the United States and had having built relationships with people over there in the US, it kind of also as a specialist of media and observing all those phenomena, it kind of made me realize that community means something in some places and means something else in others. So this is just my explanation of why I felt that we had to, at one point,
mm.
kind of dive deep into the topic of family. And I mean, I'm curious to know what your kind of representations of family in pop culture are. And I think we need to, I mean, I could actually take it way back to growing up and watching television and seeing all those shows.
Oh, exactly. And it's, I mean, well, just one thing I mean, reality TV, there's probably like there's kind of two, well, not just two, but when I think of family in pop culture, there has been the very stereotypical, perfect, in inverted commas, family. So I think back to Leave It to Beaver, which was a show which was just, the husband went out to work. June Cleaver, the family was the Cleavers, it was American. June, was the perfect, I'm not going to say Stepford wife, but the perfect wife. And, she did the cooking and the cleaning and looked after the home front. And they had 2 sons. And so there was, the way family has been represented through pop culture. And then if we think of like Happy Days, and then, going into obviously the Brady Bunch, which really for its as wholesome as the Brady Bunch was, it was a blended family. So it was quite
Right.
modern in that sense.
Yes.
It had some all these shows have a lot of issues with them, and not all of them date very well, but maybe they are a product of their time. So what we see through pop culture with families is what is happening at the time, and it is a reflection in a sort of a two-way mirror on society, because I think pop culture reflects society, but it also sort of tries to dictate what's happening in society as well around the representation of family. So, I grew up with in pop culture, very stereotypical nuclear families.
Right.
And then obviously that starts to evolve in more recent times, and particularly when reality TV comes through. And I actually would say that, the Kardashians, I think, would be the first family of reality TV. But then I question myself, because I actually think the Osbournes
Right.
were very much that first
Yes.
family. And what was interesting with the Osbournes was that they only, one of the children didn't want to be featured, Amy. So you only had Jack and Kelly. So
That's right.
you had this whole story and brand created about this family. But of course, it was only the family that we saw on TV. In fact, there was another sibling. Excuse me. So pop culture is really interesting in the way it portrays it. And I think when I think of it from a media point of view of how family is viewed, it can be very glossed over. So the idyllic family, but then the media can turn on a dime. So if I think back to, and particularly because this has come out, more recently, is people in show business talking about family. And I particularly think of Brooke Shields now coming out and telling more about her relationship with her mum and the role her mum played, which, perhaps wasn't, well, I think everyone knew she had a stage mum. I think, she's really now exposed how toxic and how damaging and the role her mother played in her, career, and as a young person being put into these roles and situations which were just not appropriate for someone of that age. But when you've got your mum doing it, the complexities there. And then I know she's been on our good friend Drew Barrymore's show, just talking about the role their parents played. Because society does paint that family should be this perfect model. And when it's not this perfect model, how does the media respond to that? And as you were talking, I was thinking then about how, I think I'm more not interested in a kind of macabre way, but I'm not really interested in sort of the nuclear family, because I think that's been, done to death. I'm interested in how media portrays different, how media differently portrays family. And I think of the show Nashville, which we loved, with Connie Britton and Hayden Panettiere.
Panettiere.
Thank you. And I think when I think to that show, it's really interesting how they portray family, because, excuse me, Hayden plays Juliet Barnes, a singer from very humble beginnings, who has an alcoholic mother who comes in and out of her life. And so they portray that kind of that more fractured and friction point of a mother-daughter or a child-parent relationship. And I think, there's a lot of pop stars, and I'm particularly thinking of some that perhaps came up through the Mickey Mouse Club era, who've, have got well-documented challenges with their parents. And so you had this girl from the wrong side of the tracks, we'll say, who made it big, a mother who lives in a trailer park, alcoholic, who she's trying to shut out of her life and shut out of her brand. And then you contrast that with Connie Britton, who plays Raina James, who's, a stalwart of Nashville, is kind of the Faith Hill of of the era, very rich dad, who's a real sort of man of Nashville and the business community. She's married to the governor or the mayor. And so just the way those two family units were portrayed in the context of those two stars, I found was interesting, because when I think back to it as you were talking, I think Nashville I don't want to say make Nashville seem like a much deeper show than it is, but it is a really good show. But I think it's actually really interesting how they portray family, how they put a mirror back on family in show business, particularly the music industry, where you've got parents who are trying. Well, Juliet's mum's not trying to make money out of her in a pushy stage mum way, but how they're trying to profit off their kids. And we see so many examples of parents in the pop culture context and environment who are trying to profit off their children and who are pushing them forward. And then you've got parents who are famous themselves, and then their relationship to their kids and the way the children become part of the brand. And I think the Beckhams is a huge example of that.
But that has a lot to do as well with how the narrative is sold from the family's point of view to the world. So obviously, these are only narratives that emerge in the media when the children emancipate from the family. So I think it's a very interesting thing to talk about, which is there's the stories that the media tell, but there's also the stories that the media are told. And you raise a very good point about, as far back as we can look, we've had narratives sold to us about families that were ultimately not so much about how different the family was, but that at the end of the day, it was a family. If you think about Bewitched, for example, and Samantha doing everything she can on top of being a witch to actually maintain this wholesome family image to the world. And, for her husband. So very much so posing as the housewife. And if you think about probably the four most important shows of the 1980s sitcoms, if you think about Who's the Boss, The Golden Girls, The Cosby Show, and Kate and Ally, they're all, obviously, and I can still remember how significant The Cosby Show was as an African-American representation. Even in France, with the show dubbed in French, I can still remember those episodes where the family had deep conversation about what it meant to be African-American in America in the 1980s and early 1990s. But if you take all those shows, at the end of the day, there was this, at the end of the day, obviously the Cosbys were a family, but Kate and Ally, Who's the Boss, The Golden Girls, it was like, we're not really a family, but we are. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it wasn't so much how different they were, but it was that at the end of the day, they were still a family. And that's what I meant when I said that family still holds this very kind of conservative value, that as much there's something aspirational about it, and there's something aspirational that's been sold to us about it, as however much you choose the people you surround yourself with, that's what you're going to call your family in the end.
Exactly. And excuse me, I really do have a frog in my throat this morning. And I think that being sold that aspiration, because I think and it's interesting, like I loved The Cosby Show. Obviously, we now realise there was issues with that. But and obviously, it was one of the only, apart from maybe Good Times, I'm trying to think of some other shows on Australian TV that represented African-American culture. But to me, I was just watching a family. I know there were certainly episodes where they talked about racism and, rooted racism in community. But what I liked about that show, it was just a family. It didn't matter where
Right.
they came from. But if you
Yes.
think of, I also think of Different Strokes, because that's
Absolutely.
another one with not that nuclear traditional family model. But you're right, we are completely sold this aspirational model of family, which is incredibly damaging because, I mean, you and I have probably actually come from quite a stereotypical nuclear family, but
Hmm.
we're probably um, in some cases we're not the norm. Not everyone has that experience. So I find it can be very damaging. So I do like when I see representations of different types of families. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
I think there's I think the media's fascination, and you raise a very good point about the fact that reality television has changed a lot of what we see in the concept of family and the way in which it's reported on, because obviously you don't report on fiction as you do on reality or some kind of reality. And what you say about the Osbournes is absolutely fascinating because yes, it's a family, but part of the family is missing. So you're only seeing what you're given as a narrative, and
correct.
how real is it if part of it isn't there?
Exactly. And I never forget when I went through a moment of loving the Real Housewives of New Jersey. And of course, that has featured three sisters, I think. And I remember one of the sisters, Dina, decided to not continue in the next season. And I remember the others so one of her other sisters and one of the friends were out at a restaurant, and they were like, "We're really going to miss her." And they showed an empty chair. And it's like, no, she hasn't left your life. She's just left the
Right.
show. But the
Hmm.
way they spun it, and I just thought this is just bizarre. And I mean, it's the same in uh like oh my god, the hills, and Laguna Beach, where you would have parts of families shown in these reality TV shows but not the full family. But you were
Hmm.
just sold this tiny um sort of microscope on the family while you were actually missing the full context. But it was sold to you that this is the family. So it always makes me chuckle in reality TV when you hear those things.
Well, if you think about it, a family is your bubble as well. I
Mm,
mean, and if it's your bubble, I think reality television really started with the real world on MTV when they
mm-hmm.
wanted to go into original programming but had no money. So they kind of stripped the concept as much as they could and ultimately landed on the fact that the only thing that would work was to bring real people into a house, film them, and see what happens. And and that's creating a bubble.
Mm.
So what is a family other than the most immediate bubble? Then, that's the one that you're born into, and that's the one that is supposed to have your back. And I can also say that this can be very triggering to a lot of people,
Mm,
what we're talking about today. And I want to acknowledge that because obviously we all have very different experiences with family. And I can also understand how seeing all those representations as the only wholesome model to aspire to can be very triggering for a lot of people in very many ways. So
mm,
I don't want to make light of something that I understand as well is quite heavy for a lot of people. But we are in the business of looking at this from kind of a lighter perspective and kind of trying to decipher some of the phenomena at play in this
mm,
context. But you raise a very good point. And going back to what we were saying about reality television, it has really created an expectation of um, families as a new point of interest in the media
exactly.
sphere. Before, it was only the royals that were kind of the royal families, and I mean, there's varying degrees of fascination for varying royals around the world, depending on where you are. And I mean, in France, we're not really obsessed with the British royal family as, other countries
Yes.
be. But that was one of the representations, and I think that was very the pinnacle of that would have been the 1990s with Sarah Ferguson and Princess Diana, and all of those dynamics of people being brought into this wholesome family that is such a heavy representation of all things prim and proper, and kind of shaking things up a bit.
Yes. Well, I agree. I would challenge you on that because I think the Kennedys in
Oh, yes.
America
I
have a
agree with you.
huge history. And if you, and
Yeah,
the way Joe Senior, the father, I mean, the way that family, I mean, they, um, well, it's interesting. I mean, just as I'm talking, I'm thinking back to, if you look at the royals through history. And I remember when I was backpacking around Europe, every country we went to, we heard about the Habsburgs. And so this was a
yes,
very prominent royal family in Europe and with a very strategic mother. So, for instance, Marie Antoinette was a Habsburg, which I had no idea. And I mean, I love Marie Antoinette, but I had not sort of placed her in this Habsburg family where, their children were basically, every marriage was strategic into
that's
each
right.
country because it was around creating allies. So,
Like a game of chess.
absolutely. So, if you look at the way that, family in that context and how family was used as a political, um, and creating allies, and it was strategic. That's what I think I want to say. Family was strategic. It's the same if you look at the Kennedys. I mean, the Kennedys and the way they married, all of that was around strategy and power. Um,
Yes.
and so, but I think if you look at coming up through, sort of the golden era, and I say that in inverted commas, of Hollywood, your Judy Garlands and your Liza Minnellis and your Isabella Rossellini's and your Peter Fondas and your Jane Fondas, or your Frank Sinatras and Nancy Sinatras. There's been family and the way family has played out and been portrayed. And I mean,
That's
of
right.
course, there's, multiple marriages in a lot of those. So it's
Yes.
not that nuclear family, but it has been really interesting around how family has been pushed on us. And so then I think people, because it has been pushed on us, as this aspirational thing, you then get families really hooking onto that to create a brand of the
That's
happy
right.
family, which of course the Kardashians, and just speaking on a lighter note, because I think one of the, I mean, I am not a fan of the Kardashians. I don't watch the Kardashians. It's not my bag, but you know, credit to people who do enjoy it. But I do remember seeing a snippet of Keeping Up with the Kardashians, which, I mean, it was just perfect. So it was when Bruce Jenner, was Bruce, and one of Bruce's children was trying to get into the music. Well, one of his sons and I think it was his daughter-in-law play sort of folk music, and they were wanting help to get a record deal or something along those lines. And he said to Chris, "Could you get them a meeting with?" I don't know whether it was Babyface, but it was a producer. And I remember Chris going, "Oh, I don't really mix business and family." And then Bruce's piece to camera was, "Your whole business is your family." I mean, and look, to credit to them, I loved that they kept that in the editing. But he was so funny talking to the camera. And I'm talking of Bruce at that time, obviously, Caitlin now. But it was hilarious, just the irony of it. And of course, it's all manufactured. I mean, we think back to Jessica Simpson and Nick Lachey in
Nicola Shea.
Newlyweds. I mean, that whole
Yes.
concept of this happy married family, which, I mean, was so dysfunctional.
hmm
And if they
Well,
hadn't had a reality show, I'm not sure they would have even got married. But it was around, creating a brand. We think back to Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears. And that's why I'm really fascinated with the Beckham brand. And I remember working on a PR project, maybe 10 years ago, and we actually looked, it was when the Beckham brand was really growing, and branching out. And there was, a lot of commentary on actually how much the Beckham brand was worth and how much each person attached to the Beckham brand was worth. And we actually looked, it was for a PR launch, and we actually looked at bringing David Beckham's sister out. because she was starting a brand, and just her association with being David Beckham's sister had huge value.
That's
She had
right.
a moment. She's dropped. We don't hear as much about her, but at that point she was getting more prominent. So you don't even have to be in the immediate family or famous, but just by association
Yeah, absolutely.
you leverage off that family brand.
Hmm.
And of course, for the Beckhams, a brand that has built itself on this tight knit family. um, and then you get this narrative of Brooklyn now going off and marrying. Now, anyone who goes off and gets married, of course he's going to have a new life. They have well, he's now got a wife as part of his family. And this media, and as I said, we're just reading the media commentary, so how true or not, I'm not going to speculate on that. But this expectation that this son is forever supposed to just stay in this tight nest and not actually go out and have a family of his own. And of course his wife has her own family. So it's going to change the dynamic. But of course
Of
it's
course.
breaking up this very powerful brand that has positioned itself as this very tight-knit family. So watching that play out, I'm very interested in.
I mean, leaving the nest has always been a big topic, but going back to the Kardashians, you were talking about irony before. I think that the real irony of the Kardashians is the real life stuff that has happened to them that, I mean, beyond the manufactured aspect of everything in Keeping Up with the Kardashians and the subsequent shows, there is a very heavy component of stuff that you can't make up. I mean,
Mm.
some things that have happened to them that is really things that you can't make up. So obviously a lot of that would be manufactured and, produced and maybe overproduced, but at the same time, some of those life events that the Kardashians have gone through over the however many years they've been on the air, that is something that you can't make up. But you raise a really good point with um, I feel talking about the Beckhams, I was going to say you raise a good point with the Beckhams, absolutely. I feel that, I mean, if you think about it, I feel that Victoria is keeping a very low profile. I mean, she's just going about running her business and her fashion empire and her makeup, and which apparently is really good makeup from
Oh.
I mean, an informed source tells me that it is really good makeup. That's my sister. So so yeah, oh, we'll talk about sisters in a bit. But yes, that's a I feel that the person we're seeing the most is still David for some reason.
Well, he
Um,
just turned 50. So,
yeah.
um,
Hmm.
uh, yeah, because I mean, I mean, any commentary you read around Victoria and her fashion, I mean, I think she's an amazing fashion designer, and apparently she's a very hard worker. So I think she does buckle down, whereas
Yes.
David is in front of the camera
Hmm.
roles. Because I saw him hosting some, like Tom Brady and a few other people at the recent this is no disrespect to any. I was going to say the the latest soccer tournament that France won, just to really downplay the importance of that um, tournament. But he does seem to be in the public eye a bit more. But it's interesting when you were talking about the Kardashians, and I know we've kind of veered into reality families at the moment, but the and the things that they have gone through. I mean, it is bonkers, isn't it? Because we read about them in the news and we see them going about their business, but then we just suspend reality for a moment when the new season comes out and watch stuff that we know happened 6 months or 12 months ago, but it's like we just tune out everything else that we know about them. I
That's
mean,
right.
and I say
We
that
check our brain.
obviously it can't, we go, oh, we want to see the episode where, Kanye
I
ranted or something,
I think
but
that's called checking your brain at the door.
it
Because,
is.
we check our brains at the door and we just because that's light entertainment at the end of the day.
Correct, exactly. But it is bonkers because we know all this stuff has happened, but then we watch a show that was filmed 6 months ago and get all
Right?
excited because it's the latest season. But we know everything that happens. Why do we? I mean, I don't do that, but why do, as a society, not everyone obviously does that. But it's the same on it's the same on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And I mean, that's been an interesting one on family because you've had, particularly the latest season, a lot of marriage breakups
That's
that
right.
have played out in and outside of the show. You also have on that show three sisters. Um,
Mm-hmm.
one with very well, and one who was on the show, so was a willing participant and signed on to be in the spotlight. And so I'm talking about Kyle Richards, Kim Richards, and Kathy Hilton. And of course, Kim Richards and Kyle were sort of child stars, so they came up through showbiz. But you've got Kim Richards with very well documented and really sad addiction. And when I say
Yes,
sad, I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean you do. It is really heartbreaking to see someone go through these addictions. And I
that's
always had
right.
a real issue with and I'm just going to go on a tangent here, with the housewives and their duty of care. And there's certainly seasons she should never have been allowed to participate in. And, there's clearly pieces to camera where she's going through some struggles. But I think back to the reunion, and she's no longer on the show, but I think back to the reunion episode, the most recent one, and they ask Kyle and Kathy how she's doing. And you can see it is really heartbreaking that these sisters, talking about their sister who's going through some really tough times.
That's
So that's
right.
been interesting how that's been portrayed. So you do get all versions of family and much more modern family. Those kind of things wouldn't have been shown. They would have been happening in the
But
golden
that's
era, but they wouldn't have been
mhm.
shown in the way that they're shown now.
Yeah, and that's the first thing people say usually when they separate, was like they're like, we'll always be a family. But will
Mm.
they? When Mariah Carey divorced from Tommy Mottola, she was like, we're still gonna be best friends and stuff. And Tabitha Soren, I don't know if you've seen that interview. I mean, that's a master class in interviewing, that interview of Mariah
Ah,
Carey in 1997 before the release of the Butterfly album. So yeah, Tabitha Soren was like, "Well, if you're getting along so well, why are you divorcing?"
well, and actually, that's playing out at the moment with Hugh Jackman and Deborah Lee Furness,
Right.
because they were two that separated and divorced, and it was all very amicable, and we have a lot of love for each other. And of course, we're
Hmm.
realizing there was a lot more to it, and it's been really interesting because, well, two things. Are these statements put out to minimize the public interest in the divorce by saying we're going to be? And I remember listening to the interview with Gwyneth Paltrow about the uncoupling comment. And she
Right.
said, they never meant for it to take off. Like, it was just, they'd never used the word, but they were going through their divorce. And I think she had, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit. Well, I'm paraphrasing a lot here, but I think they had talked to people who had gone through divorce, and they wanted to minimise the impact on their kids, and divorce was such a negative term. And so when they
Yes.
spoke with their lawyers and their publicists, they said we don't. They wanted to avoid that really negative tone and they seem to be genuinely a couple that have stayed good friends. And so the word uncoupling was used, and then of course it went viral, but they never meant for it to be. So I think you do have ones that genuinely do stay on good terms. Naomi Watts and Liev Schreiber, they seem to be on good terms. You see their respective new families featured together quite a bit, and definitely Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin seem to pop up at each other's family things. Where am I going this? Oh, Deborah Lee Furness and Hugh Jackman. So I think there is an element of ones that do genuinely separate and remain friends. I think there's the ones that clearly are not friends but want to minimize it by saying we're friends. And it's been really interesting because that's what happened with Hugh Jackman and Deborah Lee Furness. Deborah Lee Furness has since come out with a statement which has alluded to a lot more about betrayal, and it cuts deep and has blown it apart. So then there's been commentary around her statement and why did she need to release that? And everyone was moving on, and why did she need to come out with that? And then there's been a lot of commentary around the commentary of why does she need to make everyone feel comfortable?
That's
Why is
right.
it her job to make everyone feel at ease? Because there's been this kind of, oh, well, why did she need to come out and air their dirty laundry? That's kind of been the commentary around it. But why shouldn't she have a voice? And why
Well,
is it and I am going to use gender here because I think it predominantly falls on the woman to keep the peace. And why does
Mhm.
she need to make everyone feel at ease and feel comfortable? And why can't she make people feel uncomfortable by actually telling the truth, her truth behind it? So it's I've really found it fascinating, the commentary on top of the commentary on top of the commentary. But I think that power of why is it her job to keep everyone feeling
Well,
comfortable, I think
because
is so true.
I think people are still buying into all these concepts of wholesomeness and the fairy tale and the happy ending and all of these stories that are still as much progress as we've made on so many issues. And I mean, there's still a whole lot of work to do, particularly considering the context that we live in today. But at the same time, these are concepts that are so deeply entrenched in
Mm,
people's brains and hearts, and they're really difficult. People can't seem to shake away some of these. And maybe the media buy into that because they stand from a perspective of selling the wholesomeness, because the line of reporting will always be, oh, look at how well these two are getting along.
yes.
So,
But
and if they don't, then the line of reporting is going to be quite different. And I'm not talking
yes,
about heavy
yes.
journalism here. I'm
No,
talking
no,
about
no, no.
casual
Of
journalism.
course,
So,
of course. But it's that question, isn't it, of does the media buy into it or does the media dictate it? Are we responding to the media or are the media responding to us?
I
In
mean,
that,
this is yeah. I mean, this is a conversation we've had that, before. I mean, it seems now that the people who are talked about in the media can actually have their say in the ways that they want because they have so many more channels now to
yes,
actually put out some of the information, which is exactly what happened with Deborah Lee Furness, which is,
exactly.
putting out a
Yeah.
statement. That's not, I mean, usually you had to send a statement out to newsrooms and fax the statement out to newsrooms, not knowing
Well,
really what was going to happen, or just kind of give an exclusive interview
well,
to
she,
one
she,
media
she,
outlet.
yes, but she did put the statement out to the Daily Mail, which did
Oh, there
confuse
you
me.
go.
I mean, that's the part of the statement that really confused me that she put it out to them.
Mhm.
But it's like as you were talking, I was thinking, that kind of does the media dictate it, or is the media reflecting what people are pushing? And there's two couples I think of that are very much pictured as the golden couples, but they actually fight hard. Well, when I say fight hard, I think they're quite vocal in pushing back against being the perfect couple. So I think of Michelle and Barack Obama, and I mean, they do portray themselves as well. No, they don't. I think we wanted to buy into them being a perfect couple, and they seem a very solid couple. But Michelle is very vocal about I didn't like him for 10 years, and then there's a lot of commentary on that going, well, if you didn't like your husband for 10 years, what kind of relationship is that? So she
Mhm.
certainly, I think, she pushes back on, and he does too, and she's talked about going to therapy, and that you get into couples therapy, and you want to say to the therapist, and this is what he did next and this is what he did next, and you realize you're part of the problem. So she's very
Right.
vocal about that. And the other couple I would say who are very open and can be perceived as the perfect couple but actually push back is Kristen Bell and Dax Shepard. And of course, partly because of Dax Shepard's podcast, that they can actually push back. And I remember it's about hit the fourth episode of Armchair Expert, which was actually one of the first episodes they recorded. He had her on. And they were mid-fight when they recorded the episode, and you can feel the friction between them, like it's tense. And so he does a little bit at the start of the podcast where he says, I really am denied about, do I put this out? But in fact, it's reality. And he
Mhm.
talks a lot about how they fight and issues they have, and because he said, and she does it too, I don't want you to all think we are this perfect couple, because relationships are hard. So then you've got these perfect couples that do portray themselves as perfect couple by what they put out through social media, but then also push back against being a perfect couple by what they put out through their platforms of podcasts. And of course, Michelle Obama has a podcast with her brother now.
Right.
So, she has more of a voice to things. And just thinking back to the Obamas, when there were two key things that Michelle Obama didn't attend to state. One was a funeral, and I think the other one was it maybe the inauguration.
Right.
And of course, there was all this, oh, they must be splitting up. And, I've seen podcasters talk about they know that, Obama's on with Jennifer Aniston and that's well known. And, so everyone's got to have a little opinion. So what happens when the perfect couple don't behave in the way that the media want the perfect couple to behave? What happens? What happens?
I was gonna give you my answer that I always give, is that do we have to answer that question?
No, of
I
course.
mean, I don't think we do, and I think there's still a very different approach to couples than there is to a whole family.
Yes.
And I think there's still differences in treatment.
Okay, but I'm going to stop you there
Yes, please do.
because, well, we neither of us have children, but I still
No,
consider my family with my partner my family.
I
So
agree with you.
what's a whole family as opposed to a couple?
But I'm not talking about how we consider it from the inside. I'm talking about how the media consider
Oh,
it from the
okay. Okay,
outside.
good because
Oh, I
I mean as
100%.
yes, because as someone who doesn't have children, I constantly have comments made to me
And
about that. And
yeah,
you'd be the
well, for
same,
me,
obviously.
being in a gay relationship, for me, that question comes up in a very different kind of
Yes,
way.
of course.
But at the same time, yeah, and I agree with you. And it's not so much, and there's family. I mean, what we consider our life partner to be our family, of course. And I mean, and it can also be more than that. I mean, I've come to revisit the concept of home for the past
Mm,
5 or I don't know, however many years, because we moved so much and my home wasn't a place anymore. My home was a person.
yes.
You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yes.
So I absolutely agree with you 100%. And but I really wanted to point out that it wasn't so much about how we felt it from the
Yes.
inside,
No, okay.
how the
Yeah.
media saw it from the outside. But I want to kind of expand a little bit because and really focus on media coverage. And you raised a very good point about how these dysfunctional relationships are only born in the public eye once there's an emancipation from
Mm.
the
Mm-hmm.
dysfunctional relationship. So you were talking about, I mean, we talked about Drew Barrymore, and you gave another example, Brooke
Brooke
Shields.
Shields. Yes.
That's right. And also, I mean, one of the biggest stories in the States over the past, I'd say, couple of years was Jeanette McCurdy's book, I'm Glad My Mom Died,
Of
which,
course. Yes.
I mean, she was the child actress, Nickelodeon star, and I remember her as a little child on an episode of Will and Grace. I vividly
Mm.
remember, like, she has 3 lines
Wow.
on that episode, and I mean, I remember her from that episode. Her book is fascinating, and the way in which she's come out to talk about her relationship with her mother is very interesting. And I'm gonna kind of flip it now to the deification of the figure of the mother in the media. And so
Mm.
over the past few years, with a few very specific cases, and I know I sent you a link to kind of a round table. I love a round table. I think it's an
You do
amazing
love a round table.
format.
And whenever a Hollywood Reporter round table pops up on my Instagram, I always think of you.
Well, thank you very much. And well, this wasn't the Hollywood Reporter, but it was Glamour magazine who actually came up with a roundtable of 4 mothers. And the title is Moms Talk About Raising Superstars. And the moms are Miss Tina Knowles, Beyonce's,
Yes.
Selena Gomez's mom, Donna Kelsey, so Travis and
Yes.
Jason's mom, and Billie Eilish's mom as well. So these 4 women are brought together to talk about raising their children. and how they raise their children. So there seems to be more and more of a fascination from the media point of view, and we're talking about women here. So the figure of the mother, and we spoke
Yes.
extensively about the figure of the father in our first episode this season.
Yes.
Kind of gave a shout out at the end to moms as well. But at the same time, I find it fascinating that the media are really shining a light on mothers in very different ways. And this year, for the first time, Billboard magazine, in its list of women in music, honored a mom as Mother of the Year. And that Mother of the
Mm,
Year is Ms. Tina Knowles, so Beyonce's mom. Her
yes.
speech was very interesting, to say the least. And she's just released a book, Tina Knowles, called Matriarch. So that also carries a lot of meaning in itself.
Yes.
I was really fascinated by those very specific cases, but at the same time, I'm like, are we taking this too far by giving an award to a mom for raising her children to be superstars? I don't have an answer for this, and certainly, I mean,
Well, I guess
there's
if we,
food for thought there.
of
If you
course.
have an opinion,
Well, oh, I have a lot of opinions. Well, if
please
I mean we
share.
applied the same thing, would we award a Nobel Peace Prize to the parent of someone of a top scientist or a top? Do you know,
There
like
you have it.
if we applied that same model? But it is really interesting that. Oh God, you've got a Danny Minogue jar. I need a jar for the amount of times I say it's very interesting. But I do find all of this very interesting.
Well, we're going to be talking about Danny Minogue soon.
Yes, we'll save the best to last. But family is, and when you bring up the portrayal of mother, I mean, gosh, we could, particularly through uh, those sort of really stereotype kind of shows where the dad goes out to work and he's the very in control, very calm and measured character. And I'm not saying all shows, but the typical shows. And the mother's maybe a little bit frazzled and she's running around and she's the mother is always portrayed in a certain way. And it's just reminded me, and it's a shame I didn't remember this before the podcast, because I actually wrote an essay on the portrayal of mother at uni, but actually how, and it was around the grotesque and the way the mother was
Yeah.
portrayed in What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I must dig it out. It's in the office. It's terrible, isn't it, that I completely forgot I had written that
I'm
episode
glad you
essay.
remembered it now.
Yeah, and just the way the mother was used to portray a certain way. And if for anyone who hasn't seen What's Eating Gilbert Grape, it's an amazing movie set in sort of, I don't know, country America with Johnny Depp and Leonardo DiCaprio,
Leonardo.
a very young
Right.
Leonardo DiCaprio, who plays a boy with, we would realize now, would be on the spectrum. It's not
Mm-hmm.
kind of talked about in the show. His mother is morbidly obese, cannot come downstairs, is pretty much bedroom bound, and there's a whole layer of stuff around that. An absolutely amazing film, and actually a film that I must go back and watch because I watched it a lot during my uni days because I loved it so much. But the portrayal of mother in that one is really pointed. So the women and mothers have been portrayed in a very certain way, and even women. And I think back to when I was at school, we had a change of headmistress during my senior years, and the retiring headmistress, I would describe, she'd been in the role for 100 years. She'd also been a student at our school. She looked like the Queen a bit, she looked like the Queen a lot. And then the new headmistress came, and so she was quite traditional. If she walked in the room, you all stood up. She had that certain sort of gravitas. The new
Right.
headmistress arrived and she looked like Princess Diana. She was tall and thin, and very different. And it was a girls' school. And I remember she would call out sexism in the media. And I remember some girls really scoffing at it. And I remember she showed us an ad once, and it was an ad for, I think it was Qantas, it was an airline. And it was around book one business class seat, get one free. And the ad was a picture of a man in a suit with glasses, because they always put glasses on people to make them look smart. And next to him was like an outline of his wife. So, of course, the presumption and the meaning was that the men are the business people. So they'd be flying business class and the woman would tag along as his plus one. And she called it out. And I remember the assembly that she called out sexism in the media and for us to challenge it. And I remember some
Right.
of the girls I went to school with really scoffed and went, oh, in the kind of, oh, give us, like, let it go. She's
Mm.
overthinking this. But she absolutely was ahead of it. Well, not ahead of her time, but she was, as teens, she was getting us to question how we are portrayed in media. And that one, I can clearly see the ad she showed us, because it painted the family unit as the businessman with the
Yep.
wife that is obviously
Mhm.
stay at home. If she wouldn't be traveling for business, but she'll go along to the conference with him, you know. Um,
Right. But if you think about narratives, for example, in the case of Tina Knowles, she was always part of the Destiny's Child narrative from day
yes,
one.
yes,
She was the girl's stylist, and any chance
yeah,
they got, they would actually mention Beyonce's mom and the fact that she was the stylist. So she was always part of the narrative. And I think that it's very interesting to see now because I mean, certainly all of this has to do with the campaign for the autobiography and how this, I thought I was the only one thinking about the concept of deification in the United States for some people. And certainly we've had this conversation. And they're the people that you can't say anything negative about because other people, because like
yes.
fans will come for you.
We don't want the
So, I
beehive
mean,
after us.
well, Beyonce and Taylor Swift, and even people like
Yes.
Oprah Winfrey now, or
Oh,
other, a small group of people that we've reached such a level of deification of these people that there's very little room left for anyone to say anything negative about them. So
mm,
but I was at a dinner party, one of the last dinner parties that I went to before moving back to Europe, and I was sitting across from a friend who's a psychologist, and she actually used the words deification. And it
mm,
actually kind of made me feel good about having had that word in my mind for so long, because it was the first time that I'd actually heard it from an American person's mouth,
mm,
that they were kind of having this distance from what they were observing. I mean, obviously, a psychologist knows
mm.
how to read between the lines as well. But that was very interesting, and I felt that roundtable was also very interesting to have, Selena Gomez's mom and Travis Kelce's mom and Beyonce's mom and Billie Eilish's mom. I mean, also Phineas and also
Yes, yes.
Kelsey. But I also want to extend this to um, seeing a family come together before the world, that before our very eyes, and how much frenzy that creates in the media. And the best example for that was Jason and Travis Kelce were
Mm,
already superstars
mm-hmm.
before Travis started dating Taylor Swift. They
Yes.
were already superstars in their own right. There was that whole thing about them
In
competing
America, I
against
will stop you
in
and I'll
America.
say that in America.
I agree with yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
not
In
worldwide.
America, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. But they were already, competing against each other at the Super Bowl, and their mom was already in the public eye as well. So there was a lot there that was already happening. And but when Travis Kelce started dating Taylor Swift, and Jason had already had his documentary on Amazon Prime and all of that. So when all of that came together, it was like it became so much bigger than the sum of its parts.
Yes. Because as a
Became
family, they haven't changed. It's
That's
just the
right.
way we see them has changed.
That's right. But add Taylor Swift to the mix,
Of
to a
course.
family that was already so layered. And then Jason's wife, Jason and Kylie, that will forever crack me up that they are Jason and Kylie Kelsey. But if you think about it, you know what? I was lobbying for Jason Kelsey to go on stage with Kylie Minogue at one of her American shows and perform especially for you with her because the guy can sing.
Can he?
Yes, the guy he released a Christmas album with the Philadelphia Something Choir.
How did I not
So
know this? I love a Christmas album.
well, there you go. So I was so, and I that would have been a different level of Jason and Kylie. I think we should end on this. I mean, I have nothing better. I have nothing better to say than what I just said, but I will. I will say
We've been
more.
building up to this moment. But you're right, because these families have been going along. I mean, the Osbournes had been living life, and suddenly we
That's
just
right.
put cameras and it's like this whole new family.
Yeah,
And I mean, look, because wasn't it Sharon's dad who was Ozzy's manager? I think so. Like their whole family unit, goes back quite some time. I just want to pull myself up on a couple of comments I've made about this portrayal of mums, stay-at-home mums, particularly around sort of Leave It to Beaver shows. I mean, at that time in society, it stereotypically would have been the man going out to work. So
that's right.
there was I'm not saying that they were painting something completely different to society. It's how the media needs to move along with society, and it's kind of
Yeah,
that you need to what is it? I can't be it if I can't see it kind of thing. So,
right.
people can't aspire to things if they don't
Yeah,
see themselves represented. And we know that across gender, across racism, across race, across every, across accessibility and, across every representation of minority groups if they're not represented. If you're not
right.
seeing yourself there, how do what role does that play in life? But yeah, it's when you were talking about that round table, and I was just thinking too, that's kind of the poster for the good stage mums, as
Right.
opposed to the bad. But you don't often hear about the stage dads. I mean, maybe with Britney Spears a little bit, but this role of the stage mum is really pushed
Hmm.
out there. Perhaps in sport, you might hear about the dad more, and certainly in Australia, we've got very well documented case of Elena Dokic, one of our top tennis players, who has been very open in really sharing her story of what was happening behind the scenes with her dad, Damir Dokic, who
Right.
actually recently passed. So that's added a whole, she's dealing with grief with a very complicated relationship with her father, which she's actually been quite open about dealing with the grief. She's been open about on Instagram, and I actually was lucky enough to interview her at a recent event on stage, and it's incredibly interesting because the way the media portrayed that is, and I'll come back to the stage mums, but just while I'm on her, certainly, he was made fun of. Like, I mean, I remember there was a show in Australia that had the Damir Dokic Award for like someone who'd had a bit of a brain fade and, had done something stupid, which now that we know the family and domestic violence that was going on behind the scenes, I mean, it is just appalling how the media not only made fun of him, but and there were people behind the scenes who clearly would have known what was going on, and so it was almost protected. Is I think I find frightening the duty of care, and Elena actually gets asked that all the time. Is she angry at the media? And journalists have actually come out and apologised for how they reported on their relationship. So I think in sport, you sometimes have the dad featured a bit more, particularly in tennis. I can think of a lot of female tennis players with very dominant fathers in the picture. But that stage mum is very much a sort of a stereo, like an archetype kind of how they're
Well,
portrayed,
yeah, and then
rightly or
there's
wrongly.
right. And then like I said, some of those stories only emerge when emancipation happens. I
Exactly.
mean, people will notice things and they'll be suspicious of some things, and and then the media will go as far as they're allowed to go until a reaction happens, you
Mm.
know, and that ties in with our stand-up comedy episode of award shows where people have to sit in the audience and take jokes that are somehow very insensitive. And I think that the person who kind of summed it up best was Taylor Swift in one of her songs when she says, is it a wonder I broke? Let's hear one more joke. Then we can all just laugh until I cry. You know what I mean? So it's
Oh,
always,
absolutely. I mean, I just want to pause there for the fact that you said Taylor Swift said it best. we've come, we've come so far in a
look how
season.
far we've come.
How
Yeah, no,
far we've
no,
come.
I mean, who's afraid of little old me? That's a classic
Oh my
already.
gosh.
Yes.
But I mean, the man is a
Yeah.
classic.
Yeah. But I mean,
But it
relevant to
is,
the
but
topic that we're talking about
of course,
in
and
terms of the stories have to hatch sometimes, and they
yes,
can only hatch when the environment is conducive to the
of
hatching.
course, of course, and it comes down to that. Whose story is it to tell as well?
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, if we, and we let's look at Deborah Lee and Hugh. It's obviously her story
Right.
because but she's also telling his story, and so there'd be an argument of, well, does she have a right to talk about his story? If they and I'm not saying right or wrong. So it does come down to that, and it's I mean, it's timely that Meghan and Harry have just dropped their video of them dancing in the birthing suite, trying to induce the birth of their baby. What,
Mm,
4 years later or something? I mean, this couple that crave privacy but will drop incredibly private things when it suits them, and that is a judgment, and I am very open on my judgment on those two and the way they use the media. But it is because they are, that's family. I mean, you couldn't get more family. They're about to have a baby. But it is, that when it comes to family, it is that whose story is it to tell? And I think Kyle, and if I think back to the reunion episode of Beverly Hills, yeah, the Real Housewives of Beverly
the
Hills.
Real
I
Housewives.
I
Yep.
nearly said 90210 because I was listening to the Tailor Made playlist available at all places where you get our playlists, and I realised actually how much I talk about 90210. But Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Um, I think Kathy Hilton and Kyle tread a very fine line, and I think they do it as best they can to
Yes.
respond to the interest in their sister, who did put herself in a reality show. So she did give permission, really, to be talked about, and because she opened herself up and her life in this reality show. But I think they do very well to tread a very fine line of not talking that, not it's not their story to tell what their sister's going through, but they can talk
That's
about
right.
it as sisters. And so I think they can, on the whole, and I'm not going to say I've watched every time they've been interviewed about Kim Richards, but I think they do keep quite a, I think they can tell as much as they can as a sister, but it's not their story to tell. Now, that's not saying there has been some very public moments in the Real Housewives between Kim and Kyle, and interventions and things like that, and sisterly fights and all that kind of stuff. But it is that whose story is it to tell is really interesting when it is your family. So you are part of the story, but do you have the right to tell the whole story of your family? Um, and I'm just looking at the clock too, and God, this episode
That's
could
right.
go for hours.
No, but I feel that it is each person's decision to make and kind of take
Yes.
license to actually do what they think they should do.
Mm.
And from the outside, I think it's
And I'll just stop there. Is another really interesting thing is not the fact that I said really interesting again, but is how family can weaponize the idea of family in the public sphere when they are not the nuclear, or not the nuclear, when they are not a family that is getting along. So I think family members use family very much in a weapon in PR and that commentary. And I think we see it particularly with the language Meghan and Harry use about creating this new family and feeling safe, and that's very much weaponizing family against Harry's family. Um,
that's right.
mm,
Yeah, because that's the chosen family. You create
yes,
your own safe haven.
but they're using it in the context of, but family's supposed to be your safe one. So when your family doesn't become that, I mean, there's some very pointed language in the way that Harry and Meghan use language against, and I'm not going to say against their other family, because it is Harry's family. It's not her, it's her in-laws, but it's his immediate family. But they know what they're doing in the language they're using around weaponizing that idea of family.
That's right. And I feel that when you talk about the media and the presence, and we were talking about the Kardashians, and I feel that it's been a little bit of the same thing for the whole kind of Taylor Swift and Kelsey family situation, is that the presence of one in the media benefits all. So I was saying that it's more than the sum of its parts. But if you think about the Kardashians, with all the individual stories happening among the family as a whole has been able to sustain a presence in the media for so many years now. And I think that it kind of becomes a machine that feeds itself, adding to it the stuff that no one could have predicted that still happened. But that's kind of just life taking over sometimes.
Mm.
And it certainly, I mean, in some aspects benefits the family. And I'm not saying, I mean, terrible things happen, and I'm not saying that anyone is benefiting from that, but at the same time, that sustained interest in individuals kind of becomes sustained interest in the whole family, as a
Of
unit.
course, of course.
Hmm.
Well, if we look
Yeah.
at dance mums, is
Yes.
it, I mean, there's a whole show based around this stage mum kind of
That's right.
idea.
Hmm.
Um, so
And
yes,
yeah, I want to make a parallel, and maybe that, I mean, for me, that's going to be probably the last reference. We haven't really talked about relationships between siblings.
no,
We've kind of, not specifically, but I do want to give a shout out to Danny Minogue for supporting Kylie in the way that she does, and Kylie for supporting Danny. And that's also,
yes,
and that's a very good example as well of a family where you have three children, two of whom are incredibly visible and in the
yes,
public eye, and a third
yes.
one who has chosen to be
Well,
complete.
he's literally behind the camera because
That's right.
he comes from that
Yes.
background, and I worked at Channel 9 when he was there. I
Yeah.
remember seeing him in the corridors a few times.
Well, there you
Um,
go. So completely different
yes, and
kind of
actually,
choices.
correct. And as you were talking about siblings, I was thinking of Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson.
Hmm.
Um, because they have a podcast together called Siblings or something like that. Now, they're a really interesting family because they are stepchildren to Kurt Russell, but very much have embraced him and see him as their dad. And there's a
Right.
lot of, I mean, they talk about it quite openly about their fractured relationship with their biological dad. Um,
Yes.
and then, I mean, Oliver Hudson, I mean, he's a bit of a, he likes to stir the pot. Did a Father's Day post once about Kurt Russell, and it was quite pointed against his dad. And of course, his dad came out and said, why did you need to do that sort of thing? So, I mean, that's a really interesting portrayal of a family because then you've got other children in that family who do not seek the spotlight. Um,
Yes.
so,
And I want to raise one thing that we haven't talked about is people's relationship with the concept of family in and out of fiction.
yes.
Because while I was preparing for this episode, and we've spoken about this on the show before. So, and we spoke about Shannon Doherty during the last episode, but I feel also that the reason why people are so invested in the concept of family ties in with something very personal, and Charmed is a very good example of that, and um, how people have been reacting to the feud between the actresses, mostly Alyssa Milano and Shannon
Yes.
Doherty, has so much to do with what they were portraying in fiction. This
Oh,
tight-knit group of sisters on
absolutely.
screen being the kind of quintessential representation of what a
Yes.
family is, which
Yes.
is sisters having each other's backs and
Yes.
being there for one another.
Yes.
And at the
It,
same time, kind of the veneer kind of fades and cracks off camera when you realize that the reality of it was something quite different.
Absolutely. And there's two other examples I can think of that is, Will Smith in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where there was a
Yes.
change in the actress playing
Yeah.
his aunt because of
Janet
issue.
Hubert.
Yes. And then I think of when you were talking about, and obviously we've kind of delved into a bit of the definition of what is family. And I mean, obviously there's biological family. So, we're not going to try and reinvent what family is. We're just saying, in the context of pop culture, family can take on, like
Mhm.
society, different context. But I think of Sex and the City and there's a few reasons I think of that, because they were four tight friends that you barely heard about their family. You would hear, I can remember the episode where Miranda's mum died. So you got an insight into her family, but you barely heard about, it was like their families just didn't exist. You,
That
you
is
heard,
true.
you actually heard more about like Trey, Charlotte's husband's family, because Bunny, his mum, played quite a role in it. But you never really
True.
heard about Charlotte's family or Samantha's family or Carrie's family.
Mhm.
You had little tidbits, but it was like their family just didn't exist.
And
But
real families were often portrayed as nuisances in
yes,
that, I mean, they
correct.
were always kind of getting in the way of
Yes,
things.
yes. But then you've got that element to it, but then you've got four friends, incredibly close friends. And then, of course, it comes out that one of them behind the scenes was not as close as, and we've had all that documented
Can
commentary
I,
on Kim Cattrall. So, oh,
yeah, can I say something about that though? And that's probably, I hope it resonates with our listeners. And I don't know if it's going to resonate with you because we've shared so many similar professional experiences.
mm,
And as I mean, we spoke about the feud between Kim Cattrall and Sarah Jessica Parker last season, but I went back and watched some of that footage, including Kim Cattrall's Piers Morgan interview, with a new, I mean, it's kind of with a new eye,
mm,
because and we work in events and I mean, I feel there's similarities between what we do. For a certain period of time, the event has operational planning, then delivery, then the event ends, and that's bye. Goodbye,
yes,
everyone. So it's either like a summer camp or like a movie shoot or something
yes.
like that.
You are in
And
a very intense bubble.
that's right.
You
You're in a
don't
very,
you don't see your family. All you see are your work colleagues, and you're
that's
working
right.
18-hour days
Yeah,
for months on end. Yep.
absolutely. Do we stay friends forever with every single person that we've worked so
Yes.
closely with? We don't. And some people with whom you've had in really intense relationships with for however long the event lasted, including some of the operational
Mm,
planning and everything, you don't stay friends afterwards. You get really close for a certain period of time, and then you were just colleagues. So when Kim
yes.
Cattrall says we were colleagues, and in a way that's a very healthy thing to be, I
Yes.
mean, I think she's also entitled to having that perception of the relationship that she had with people. And I'm sure I considered people friends in the past that only considered me as colleagues. Colleague.
Absolutely. Yes. Correct. But I think the element to the Kim Cattrall situation is those comments that were made over Twitter, particularly,
Oh yeah.
um, she turned. I think that's fine for her to say that, but it is more than just colleagues not keeping in touch.
Oh, absolutely.
You know.
I didn't want to settle
It's,
the feud. I really wanted to kind of address that very specific
oh, of
element that she
course.
mentioned to say we were
Yes.
colleagues, and in a way, that's a very healthy thing to
Of
be with.
course.
I mean, I
Of
think she said
course.
that. Yeah.
But I would like to just, because I'm conscious of time and we will need to wrap this up, just end on when families fracture but have to keep working together. And so the two I'm thinking of is ABBA, when the couples split, and Fleetwood Mac. So you've
Yes.
got, and these people have to continue, and in both cases have to sing songs together that talk about the divorces and the betrayal. I mean,
and have arguably created some of their best work
correct,
in
exactly.
coming up with those uh, with material in very trying circumstances.
Yes, and I think those two are fascinating because well, we've all been through heartbreak, but then to have to continue working with that person, be reminded that they are your
Mhm.
ex-partner, and then actually sing about them. And in the case of, both of them, it wasn't both partners that wrote respective songs. It was probably, like in the case of that they wrote, one of them wrote the song, but the other one had to sing it with them.
Right.
I mean, that's tough. And then have everyone watching, knowing, and then that tension. So I think those two are very, I think that's a good note to end on.
I mean, literally, it's a good note to end on because they're great songs.
They are great songs, and that would make a great playlist, actually.
Oh, yes. Let's
Yes.
add it to the playlist for
We
this
can put
episode.
some. Did Jessica Simpson and Nick Lachey? I think they did a song together. I feel they might have done a duet.
I don't remember if they did.
Yeah. Well, we
Oh,
could put Jason and Kylie's,
yeah,
especially
but
for you, on there.
I so hope that Jason and Kylie, I mean, Jason Kelsey and Kylie Minogue perform especially for you.
I,
You know what? I went a bit far by saying I was lobbying to do that, for them to do that. I was just lobbying in my head.
I
Let
think you
me,
need to. I think you need to actually start lobbying. I want to see you tagging them in messages.
I so want that moment to happen. But one last thing I wanted to say about siblings is that we've had very many instances of established, and that ties in with the stage parents,
Mm.
is that one child becoming a star and the family trying to shove the siblings down a
Oh
pit.
yes, yes,
There's been a lot of that. I mean,
there
to
has.
varying degrees of success, but if you think about Britney Spears' sister, if you
Well,
think
that's
about
right.
Miley Cyrus's sister, and also Jessica Simpson's
Oh,
sister, who
absolutely.
arguably had the
Yes,
biggest career of them all.
yes, yes. And then what happens to the sibling who doesn't make it big?
Well, I mean,
You know,
that's hard, I guess, in a
or
family
is it?
where
Because I'm
the
sure
child
Tom.
is,
I
I
mean,
don't
there's a
know.
lot. Well, I mean, we could look at lots of siblings that have the lesser known sibling. I mean, the Baldwins, I always, poor old Stephen Baldwin is right down the bottom. But I'm sure if I recall correctly, Tom Hanks talking about on the Graham Norton show. I think his brother does all the voiceover for like the Woody toys, any sort of Toy Story paraphernalia, like a Woody doll that talks. It's his brother
Right.
doing
Does it have the
it.
same voice?
Well, they must, I guess. Um,
Uh-huh.
so you kind of, there's the lesser known um, sibling that oh, yeah. I mean, there's particularly for stars that are known for their looks, and then their sibling looks like them but has not been put together perhaps as correctly as the one that has made it big. I know that's really harsh, but do you know what I
Yes,
mean? Like they look like I mean, the Baldwins. You've kind of got the ranking of the Baldwins because their looks, each brother's looks change, and there's the one that is perceived as the good-looking one.
that's
Um,
right.
and there's a lot of stars that have the sibling that looks like them, but hasn't got the traditional movie star looks that's made the other one famous. Not saying
But
they're not
also,
as good looking; they might be better
mhm,
looking, but in the stereotypical universe of
yeah.
what makes a classic good looking
And
movie star.
also, how much of that narrative is genuine media interest whenever they were trying to shove the kids, like
Mm,
the
mm,
stars' siblings, down our
mm-hmm,
throats?
mm.
How much of the media interest was genuine media interest as opposed to content that was negotiated as
Of
we'll give you an
course,
exclusive with the star if
yes,
you kind
yes,
of push the agenda on the sibling?
yes. Well,
I do not have an answer for
I
that,
was going to
but we'll
say,
leave you with this question.
thank you. Anything else before we wrap up?
Well, I'm going to be obsessing about, especially for you, I can tell you that.
And you're going to go and watch the birthing video for Meghan and Harry.
Mm-mm.
And obviously, I'm talking about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, obviously. What's her name now? Meghan Windsor or whatever.
Meghan Sussex, she said.
Meghan Sussex. Oh my gosh, that's a. How do I not know? She tells everyone she's called Meghan Sussex. That's a. That's a. I did that on purpose, obviously. But what was I going to say? Oh, Sibling Revelry is the Kate Hudson, Oliver Hudson podcast that I just mentioned.
Oh, is it what it's called?
Yes, Sibling Revelry.
Oh,
and they have
good.
siblings on. Yeah. They are two very funny people because they're very open about family dynamics and life, and there's been a lot of jokes made about the fact because I think their dad was a musician, so Goldie Hawn sort of married the musician that was never marriage material, and the fact that Kate Hudson has had 3 children, if I'm correct, with 3 different musicians, so she makes fun of herself following in her mum's footsteps.
Right.
Even though I think she has very good relationships with her at least with one of her previous partners, I think she has a good relationship.
Good on
but
her.
But they are a
say.
family that can poke fun at each other and don't take themselves too seriously.
And will stay best friends forever.
Exactly. Well, but you know what? I remember listening to her in a podcast, and this is when she's at the time of her third part, I think it's her current partner. And she talks about her first partner being her soulmate and the love of her life. And I thought, wow, how does her current partner feel about that? Anyway, I'll leave you on that note.
Well, thank you for that.
No, thank you. Are you going to go and have a nightcap before you go?
I think I'm good for tonight. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. This went in all different directions and went far longer once again than we meant to. But thank you if you are still listening. We appreciate your support and your perseverance.
Thank you so much.
Well, I wish you a good night. Well, it's always, I guess it's a good morning there.
And I wish you a lovely winter day because it's now winter in Australia.
It is winter. It has fully turned winter, yes. And until next time, thank you for listening to Drop It Like It's Pop.
Thank you, everyone.
This has been Drop It Like It's Pop.
Be sure to follow us on our Instagram page @DropLikeIt'sPop to have access to our latest episodes and playlists.
Until next time.